AFR On Demand is brought to you by Breck Golf. Try Beaver Creek today, just 20 minutes from downtown Baton Rouge in the Zachary area. They've got a PGA Tour driving range, a short game practice area, 30 to 40-yard practice shots. It's a great place to chip and putt and practice if you don't have time for a full round. Book your tee time today, golf.breck.org, golf.breck.org.
Matt Moscona.
I'm very important.
After further review.
Say it one more time.
After further review with Matt Moscona.
And here we go.
Live from the Raising Cane studio.
Let's ride!
Hour 2, off we go. Welcome aboard. Glad you're with us. AFR, presented by Relief Windows. I'm Matt.
You're a loser, Matt.
Shut up, kid. Paul O'Neill.
They're chanting Paul O'Neill's name.
You sir. And Mr. Toby Tomplay. All right, we're here. Glad you are as well. Get out there and make it a good one. Change of plans. My apologies for this, but we were supposed to have Ryan Muret in studio with us. Freshman offensive lineman from Miami, was committed to Ole Miss. When Lane Kiffin got the LSU job, he flipped a few days before signing day to LSU, signed. He's on campus, moved in, and he just texted me, said, sorry for the change, but he's got a tutoring session that just popped up. So I get it, dude. You're in college. Go to your tutoring session. So we'll see if we can catch up with Ryan. He said, can we do it tomorrow? Well, tomorrow I'm going to be on a plane to San Francisco for Super Bowl Radio Row that we're really looking forward to. So in any event, we'll try to get Ryan with us maybe next week when I get back from Super Bowl Radio Row. So Dalton Wasserman, PFF, was at Senior Bowl all last week. Nuss was a huge winner, obviously. Who else stood out? We'll talk about that in 15 minutes, about 13 minutes with Dalton Wasserman from PFF. One really significant story from this weekend that I think is worth mentioning. Found out on Saturday that Lane Kiffin was retaining a few key staff members. Now, I want to give a little bit of a precursor here because I think a lot of people maybe don't necessarily. Everybody that's an LSU fan knows who the head coach is. Most LSU fans know who the coordinators are. Like, Charlie Weiss, Blake Baker. If you're listening to this show, just by virtue of the fact that you're taking time out of your day to listen or watch, means you care so deeply about your team that you go deeper than most. And so you probably know the assistants. Like, you know who Kevin Peoples and Jake Olson and Corey Raymond and probably even a lot of the new guys, Kevin Smith, like, you know who they are. Even the most ardent LSU fans probably don't know much about the support staff. And I understand that. Maybe covering the program, we're just in a different spot to get to know these people and the roles, the important roles they fill. And something very important over the weekend happened. Hat tip Matt Zenitz. He had it first. We reported it over at LouisianaSports.net. Matt beat us by a little bit on it. But Lane Kiffin has promoted J.R. Belton to the assistant general manager. And JR isn't the only staffer that's been retained. I'm going to talk about a few others here in just a second, but I think what this illustrates most is really a pivot or just a contrast in how Lane Kiffin is doing things compared to how Brian Kelly did things. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it's a different way that they've gone about doing things. When Brian Kelly got hired, first of all, let me do this first. So when Brian Kelly got hired, he immediately purged. And remember, it was a difficult time around LSU football at that time. You'd won the national championship in 2019. COVID hit. There was a lot of the players marched without Orgeron and the coaching staff. It was the 20 and 21 seasons were ugly. It was a bad time. Okay, you had the Title IX investigation. Like, it was a bad time. Well, when Brian Kelly came in, his first inclination was there's all this bad, clean house. And they turned over like 30 staff members. I'm not just talking about like the assistants, but I mean down to like the people who answer the phone and clean the floors. I mean, he just purged. And while part of me understands why he felt the need to do that, it was also probably a situation where in some cases they threw the baby out with the bathwater. And you lost a lot of really good people. Some of them on-field staffers like Corey Raymond and Blake Baker. Some guys like Jeff Martin, Jeff Martin has worked in LSU football since he was a student under Nick Saban. He was there for the entire Saban tenure. Miles retained him for his entire tenure. Orgeron retained him for his entire tenure. I mean, Jeff had been on staff for 20 years, man. Like, incredible dude who helps, recruit and foster relationships, build events and player personnel. And Jeff was so critical. And he got an offer from USC, and LSU wouldn't match it. He didn't want to leave, but LSU didn't match it. So anyway, it's a bit of a preamble to suggest and to help you understand why I think this is so important. Because, had Brian Kelly retained, I think the biggest mistake he made when he initially got hired was not retaining some key people. Like, if you retain Corey Raymond and some of the support staff, you never see the defense, in particular the secondary, erode to the degree it was. And maybe you end up winning a national championship in 2023. You had Jane Daniels, you had the best offense in the country, but your defense was atrocious. Maybe you don't have that defensive erosion if you had maintained some of those folks on that side of the ball. Well, what Lane Kiffin did in coming in, I think is very smart, is he talked to enough people who know the inner workings of how to win here and identified who are the guys they needed to retain. And he retained them even if there was someone in that role. So we talk about J.R. Belton specifically. J.R. played football at West Monroe, played at Louisiana Tech, worked at Virginia, got hired at LSU in spring of 2021. Was obviously the 2021 season didn't go well, but he was retained. It's one of the guys that was retained by BK. And he's elevated from recruiting to, this year was got promoted to the director of football operations. And Lane Kiffin brought in his own director of football operations on this staff in Thaddeus Rivers. Well, instead of getting rid of JR because he brought in Thaddeus, they promoted JR to assistant GM under Billy Glasscock. And that's one example. I mentioned a couple times Jeff Martin. Jeff Martin was the player personnel director. Well, they brought in Mike Williams. Well, Mike Williams now has the title, the senior executive director of player personnel. Austin Shelton, who they brought in from NC State, is the director of player personnel. And Jeff Martin also has the title, director of player personnel. The point is they've created tiers to maintain all of these people that are critical. Carl St. Cyr is another guy they retained as the assistant director of player personnel. And I could go on. There's others. Donovan Tate. Just this last year, when J.R. Belton got promoted to director of football operations, Donovan Tate got promoted to the director of recruiting. Not the recruiting coordinator, the director of recruiting, an off-field staff member. Well, Donovan Tate is an incredible recruiter. He's got incredible stories. Well, he's from the Pine Belt in Mississippi. He's told me his story before. At one point, he was grinding. He was coaching high school. He was living in his car. I mean, just a total grinder that has has lived the life that a lot of these guys want to live, that they're trying to get to, and he can relate to him so much. And, well, Lane brought Dwight Wilson over from Ole Miss. Well, Dwight is the senior executive director of recruiting, and Donovan is the director of recruiting. So my point is, they have worked so hard. He's retained Sam Petito. Remember, Sam Petito was the guy on Nick Saban's staff at Alabama. It's from the Hammond area. A lot of the guys you got out of Tangipahoa, you got because of Sam Petito. Well, Kalen DeBose gets hired. He doesn't retain Petito. What does Petito do? He gets hired at Ohio State. He's there for 1 year. Who do they get? Oh, they got Caleb Downs at safety from Alabama, the center, Seth, whatever his name is, who went up there, started on their national championship team at center, recruited Blaine Bradford out of Baton Rouge. I mean, Lane worked with Sam at Alabama, by the way, so there was a relationship there, but he retained Sam Petito. He retained Eric Held, who's the director of high school relations. Held was a longtime high school coach, head coach, assistant, was the director of the Louisiana High School Coaches Association, knows every high school coach in the state. Yeah, it's important to keep that guy. So I guess I just look and I say it would have been so easy for Lane to come in and uproot everything, bring in his people, and just say this is how we're going to do it. But I think he's done a really, really good job of identifying the key staffers that they wanted to retain and finding a way to blend the staff as best that they can. Now, all these different hires and contracts and all aren't done until the board of supervisors approves them, but I think we're all under the assumption the board is going to rubber stamp all of this. But yeah, I think it's been a very intentional and very successful way that Lane's gone about building not only his on-field staff, but maybe even more importantly in this instance, the support staff, the off-field staff, which just did an incredible job helping build the #1 transfer portal class in the country. All right, it's after further review. Monday shows are brought to you by Relief Windows. Always love telling you about Evermore, EVAMOR, evermore.com, evermore.com. Drink Evermore, EVAMOR, evermore.com. We had the KKDL ball on Friday, and yeah, I was drinking some whiskey, drinking a few beers, but you better believe I had Evermore in the ice chest. I got the 12-pack of the 20-ounce bottles. Maybe they have 20, 32, and 64-ounce bottles. I didn't want to carry around a 64-ounce bottle. As a matter of fact, there's a video going around of me on the internet up on the stage with the band, the Mixed Nuts, as they were doing Neck. And in my hand, I got an Evermore bottle. Practice what I preach. Better form of hydration, natural artesian water, a Louisiana product. It's Evermore, EVAMOR, evermore.com, evermore.com. Okay, y'all, it is after further review. Let's head back to the NFL ranks. So, Senior Bowl last week. The game was on Saturday. You know, Garrett Nussmeier was the MVP of that game. Dalton Wasserman from PFF was there all week. Got to get his thoughts on what he saw in Mobile, not only from Nuss, but the other LSU guys. Who were the big standouts? We'll get some takeaways and boots on the ground perspective when we continue here on AFR.
AFR.
You know the best time to start thinking about putting in a pool? When the wind chill is 16 and you're just dreaming of spring and summer days. Duplessis Builders can help. DuplessisBuilders.net, DuplessisBuilders.net, DuplessisBuilders.net. They can put in pool, outdoor kitchen. They can even do putting greens outside in your outdoor space. You want to turn your backyard area, your outdoor area, into your own oasis, your own paradise. Make it happen with Duplessis Builders. DuplessisBuilders.net, DuplessisBuilders.net. They can build any type of custom pool you want. Grand, palatial, resort-style pools, outdoor kitchens. Or maybe you want something a little more modest. Okay. Whatever fits your backyard, your outdoor space, they could do any of it. As a matter of fact, you could design your own pool at their website. Just go to DuplessisBuilders.net and hit the Pick Your Pool tab on the homepage. DuplessisBuilders.net, DuplessisBuilders.net.
After further review, presented by Relief Windows. Windows, doors, siding, and oh, we do shutters too.
And this, though, they're going to let it keep it. Garrett Nussmeier, he pulled it and took it to the house.
Look at Nuss running for a touchdown. Garrett Nussmeier, Senior Bowl MVP over the weekend. Dalton Wasserman from Pro Football Focus was in Mobile. He's with us now. Hey, man, thanks for the time. How are you?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Doing awesome, man. Probably not as good as Garrett Nussmeier today, considering what the past 3 months have been like for him. Okay, Nuss feels like a big storyline here to all the LSU people who are keenly interested. on a national scale, what's the feeling and the sentiment around Garrett Nussmeier coming out of the Senior Bowl week?
He had a solid week. I thought he got off to a little bit of a slow start on the first day, but he got better as the operation around him got better throughout the week. And look, I went into it thinking he was probably pretty clearly the best quarterback prospect of the group. And by the end of the week, he proved that. So I think the big thing for Nussmeier is he's the one guy other than, say, Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson, and I'm assuming Trinidad Chambliss. It sounds like pretty optimistic that he's going back to Ole Miss. He's the guy that it sounds like could still be a day 2 pick and kind of have that distinction from the rest of the quarterback class that really doesn't have a whole lot of depth to it.
So where do you suspect that Garrett had fallen? How far had he fallen from the beginning of the season to now?
I think there's a mid-round debate, right? I think at the beginning of the season, there was first-round talks with him, right? Obviously, the pedigree with his dad being the Saints offensive coordinator. He had a very good 2024 season. But between the injuries and, honestly, the lack of LSU having any sort of run game, that didn't help him either because he's the type of quarterback who really needs balance in the offense, being that he's not a dynamic runner himself. So I think he dropped into maybe the early to mid-day 3 discussion. But this Senior Bowl performance, to me, might have gotten him back in about that third-round range.
What else can Garrett do, assuming he gets the invite to the Combine, Pro Day, top 30 visits, all that? How much more can he do to elevate his stock?
I think he can do more. If I was him, I would go out and throw at the Combine and continue to prove that he's healthy, right? I think that's going to be the biggest thing because when you watched him throw during the season with that oblique injury, something just didn't look right. You know, Garrett Nussmeier's he's known as like a gunslinger, right? A guy who's not afraid to make any throw, and we just didn't see that throughout this season between the lack of pass protection and the injury. So go out there, throw well at the Combine, get on the whiteboard, because he's obviously a smart guy who can process the field well. I think he could really impress scouts and coaches behind the scenes, too.
Dalton Wasserman is our guest, Pro Football Focus. He's on Twitter at PFF_Dalton, if you want to give him a follow there. Any of the other LSU guys catch your eye this week?
I thought Aaron Anderson and Chris Hilton both ran some really good routes. I mean, you talk about Anderson, especially in the slot. There's so many of those guys that come out of, into the NFL draft every year as those crafty route runners, right? So I think he could find himself a day 3 selection there with his route running. And then, Barryon Brown obviously showed off the speed in spurts. I think the hands in some tougher contested situations could still use some work, but he's going to be really valuable, obviously, in special teams with the increase in kick returns and the new rules with the kickoff. I think Barryon Brown, too, is going to have some value added to a team with his speed.
There's a couple of guys that were supposed to play that didn't due to injury with Halsey and Jack Pyburn. Any thoughts on those guys as they begin their pre-draft process?
Really like Halsey a lot, especially when you talk about a versatile safety with really good ball skills. He showed that even the year before last in Houston. When you talk about a guy who could be a single high safety, right now we have him on our draft board as about a mid-second round pick, so close to a top 50 guy there. I think Halsey is really, really good. And then Pyburn, look, it's a deep group of edge rushers, and he's a guy with a high motor, hustles every single play, and can just give you that D-line depth that every team is looking for, right? So I think 2 good, solid football players, but Halsey's definitely the headliner between the 2.
Dalton, with the rest of the week there in Mobile, any other players catch your eye, maybe who were, and not specifically just LSU guys, but guys you went in maybe a little unsure that you thought really helped themselves?
Look, this is a defensive draft, and it really, to me, was a very defensive group. You saw, especially in the early practices during the day, I thought the defensive line unit dominated. When you talk about a guy like Clemson's T.J. Parker, Lee Hunter, the interior defender from Texas Tech, right? Derek Moore from Michigan, Zion Young from Missouri. That's the most loaded group of talent in this draft is the defensive line, and a lot of those guys who are probably more like second and third round picks, they went out there and just absolutely dominated all week. I think that's the group that we're going to be really impressed with as we watch more of this tape is this defensive line group.
What if you flip it and maybe guys who went to Mobile with maybe some lofty expectations maybe didn't perform as well as they'd hoped?
I think one guy that stands out to me, probably the wide receiver from USC, Jacoby Lane. I just thought his route running wasn't as fluid, especially when you compare him to a guy of a similar build in Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, who was one of the standouts of the week. I think Lane is the guy who really needs to go to the combine and run well, do well in the cone drills to prove that he's got the feet to win in the open field. There's no doubt about his size. He made a couple of great red zone catches in the end zone. He can catch those high balls. He can go up with the best of them, but I need his feet to be a little bit more fluid. I'm keeping a close eye on Jacoby Lane.
Dalton, I know your job there isn't necessarily specifically to look at teams and to scout players, but the Saints were there, and we're obviously here in Louisiana. There's a lot of people interested in what the Saints may do. Interior linemen, receivers, kind of what people are thinking that the Saints may target or may have been looking at. Any observation from those positions or any interactions with the Saints staff while you were there?
I didn't have any interactions necessarily, but I think when you talk about receiver depth, they didn't have a lot of the top guys down there, but even then, there's some players who really showed out. If you want a big 6'3", 6'4" X receiver, Malachi Fields from Notre Dame was outstanding. Missouri's Kevin Coleman is a shifty slot player who can give you some kick return value as well, kind of in the same way that Rashid Shaheed used to before he got traded to Seattle. So I think there's a lot of receivers to look at. Interior offensive line is interesting because I think there's a lot of good center prospects in this draft, but guard is kind of fluid depending on which guys are going to be moving from tackle to guard. There wasn't a whole lot of true guard prospects down there, and I feel like that's what the Saints need the most.
He is Dalton Wasserman, PFF. Get him on Twitter at PFF_Dalton. Was there in Mobile for the Senior Bowl all week. Busy time of year, man. We appreciate you for carving out a few minutes for us.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.
Yep, thank you. It is After Further Review, brought to you by Supper Club. SupperClubBTR.com is where you can go get your reservation. SupperClubBTR.com. Hey, a week from Saturday, so we're less than 2 weeks from Valentine's Day. Remember, over at Supper Club, the entire week, you can celebrate Valentine's Day. Remember, Saturday the 14th, Valentine's Day is on Saturday. It's also the same day as Endymion. Like Erica and I will be down at the Endymion Ball that Saturday night on Valentine's Day. So if you're planning on heading to New Orleans for Mardi Gras, maybe you celebrate Valentine's earlier in the week. So get your reservations at Supper Club. SupperClubBTR.com. SupperClubBTR.com. Look, I mean, if it's celebrating Valentine's Day, a birthday, an anniversary, a graduation, a promotion, or just because, man, Supper Club's an awesome option. Maybe you got a client in town, you want to close some business, you want to have a great meal, or after work, just continue the conversation at the bar. Open seating always at Supper Club at the bar. Pop on in. There's 14 bar stools, 7 bar top tables, or bar area tables, I should say, that are always open seating. So you can always pop on in, even if you don't have a reservation. Maybe have dinner at the bar, glass of wine, cocktail, great whiskey selection there. It's at Supper Club. SupperClubBTR.com. SupperClubBTR.com. Get your reservations for Valentine's week. SupperClubBTR.com. All right, it's After Further Review. Thanks to Dalton Wasserman for joining us here. It's interesting to hear his take on Nuss, that he had probably dropped to a late day 3 pick, and maybe has crept back up now into a day 2 conversation. I mean, everyone sort of unanimously agrees Fernando Mendoza is not only the best quarterback in this draft, but likely to be the first pick of the Raiders to go number 1 overall. And there's kind of that question of who or what might be next. I saw a 2-round mock today from I think it was from Matt Miller over at ESPN, where they had Mendoza 1, and the next quarterback off the board was Ty Simpson in round 2. So they only had one quarterback coming off the board in round 1. So, can Garrett get back into the conversation for the first round? I don't know. Really take a team falling in love with him? It can happen. I mean, we saw Zach Wilson go sling it at a pro day and shot all the way up to the number 2 overall pick. So it just takes one team falling in love. I know it's an old cliche, but it is true. But it sounds like just getting out there, showing he's healthy and throwing the ball reminded a lot of teams of what Garrett was in 2024, and maybe he's jumped him back into a day 2 pick. So can maybe he climb into being a top 50 pick? Perhaps. But a lot of work still to do. But glad to see Nuss get out there and sling it and have a really good week. All right, it's After Further Review. Thanks for hanging out with us here. Monday show is brought to you by Relief Windows and ReliefWindows.com. Let me knock out a quick break. We'll continue to roll along here. It was a really busy weekend all the way around. And, Lane Kiffin did hop on a bird and go to Houston this weekend for an interesting trip that I would like to knock around a little bit. So we'll do that as we continue here on AFR.
AFR.
Let's Rev, R-E-V, letsrev.com, letsrev.com. 70,000 Louisiana home and business owners trust Rev. You should as well. At Parish Construction and Roofing, we use Rev for our wireless internet, all of our wired audio, everything. Our automation, all of it. Here at Guarantee Media, we use Rev. The Moscona household will be Rev fiber customers on Wednesday. Finally got to finishing the fiber in our neighborhood. As soon as that was done, boom, we were switching. All fiber network, super fast speeds, and again, local service. The all fiber network is so critical. I mean, think about when the power goes out, storm comes. You don't have to worry about losing internet because it's buried under the ground. R-E-V. Let'sRev.com, Let'sRev.com. It's where you can go to find out information. Let'sRev.com.
After further review, presented by Relief Windows. Windows, doors, siding. And oh, we do shutters too.
Saints quarterback coach Scott Tolzien did formally interview for the Steelers offensive coordinator job on Monday. Tom Pelissero was the first to report the interview. So we'll see what happens there. Remember, Tolzien was a quarterback on Green Bay's roster as backup, and when McCarthy was there. So we already saw Mike McCarthy hire Jari Evans, who was the Saints' assistant offensive line coach, to be the Steelers' offensive line coach. And now Scott Tolzien is getting an interview to be the offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll see if he gets the job. He is going for an interview. I do find it interesting, listening to, of course, Jay Kester and Matt Flynn host Off the Bench in the weekday mornings here on ESPN Baton Rouge. And Matt and Scott Tolzien were teammates in Green Bay for a time. And it was interesting, talking to Matt last week, coming off the Senior Bowl, where Tolzien, a lot of the Saints staffers were coaching at the Senior Bowl, and just talking about how he sort of always knew Tolzien would be a coach, or had that mind. And sometimes those opportunities, like the Senior Bowl, are opportunities for coaches like Tolzien to get that opportunity to be a play caller and to step up and have that opportunity sort of put on for the rest of the league. So I don't know. I don't have any real strong sentiment. Tolzien's never been an OC. I can't tell you if it would be a good hire or not. But they're really smart NFL people and football people who think he's a very smart offensive mind and guy. And we'll see what happens there. Of course, Doug Nussmeier is the Saints offensive coordinator. He's not going anywhere. Kellen Moore is your head coach. He's not going anywhere. So it's two former NFL quarterbacks. And one of the things that the Saints have touted is, and not bringing in a veteran quarterback, which is something I sort of advocated for, was that they got all these guys that are former quarterbacks on staff, which I guess that's one way to look at it. But I also give the example all the time, a guy like Breeze, who always wanted that backup quarterback he trusted that he could sit with on the bench when he came to the sideline looking at the tablet and go over film and pick someone's brain. He wanted that sounding board. So, if that's important to a guy like Tyler Shuck, maybe they'll go that route eventually. But for now, we'll see what happens with Scott Tolzien, who did have his formal interview on Monday with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll let you know how it goes when we find out how it went. All right, it's after further review. We are glad to have you hanging out with us here on a Monday edition of AFR, presented by Relief Windows. Lane Kiffin on Saturday took a trip to Houston, and I continue to sort of just observe the way Lane Kiffin is working and trying to decipher a lot of how he's building his program through this sort of external observation and talking to folks that know him and have covered him or have been around him well. And there's a few observations when things like this happen. that trip to Houston, I was told, this was a fundraising trip where Lane, several assistants, several front office folks got on a plane, went to Houston, and met with a lot of LSU boosters and donors and alums and things like that. EJ Kuiper, who is the president CEO of the FMOL Health System, and you might remember EJ was on the committee to hire the coach. It was Verge and Scott Ballard and Carmouche and Ben Bordelon, and then obviously the new President Roos when he was hired, and EJ was on the committee. And so EJ shared on social a photo from this event at the Post Oak Hotel, which, by the way, Post Oak Hotel is where we did our show for the Bryant Awards a couple of weeks ago. Is gorgeous. That was the first time I'd ever been to Post Oak Hotel. It's Tillman Fertitta's property. I mean, Tillman's a billionaire. His Landry's offices are adjacent to the Post Oak Hotel. I mean, they have like Ferraris on display in the hotel. It is palatial. It is gorgeous. Anyway, well, you look at this photo, and you could see a lot of the particulars that are in it. I mean, you look left to right. I'll zoom for those who can't see, but like there's Kiffin and Billy Glasscock. Standing next to Billy Glasscock is EJ Kuiper, and standing next to EJ is Clay Harris, who's LSU's chief revenue officer. Kevin Smith, LSU's running backs coach, is in the photo. We talked a little bit ago about retaining J.R. Belton. J.R. is like in the far back corner there of the photo as well. So they took a lot of these power brokers to Houston on this fundraising trip. Because remember, the way LSU just made a massive investment into football. You don't need me to tell you that, but when we illustrate it, you had to go get $54 million in commitments to buy out Brian Kelly over the remainder of his deal. You had to get $91 million in commitments to pay Lane Kiffin over the life of his contract. And then you look at everything else they've done. Charlie Weiss is making $2.5 million. Blake Baker is making $3 million. We talked about the support staff, mentioned J.R. Belton, right? Well, you brought in Billy Glasscock. You brought in a lot of those support staffers from Ole Miss. Well, instead of getting rid of the people with the equivalent job title at LSU, they retained them and just have a senior executive player personnel director and then a player personnel director. So you retain them both. Point is, that is so expensive before we ever even start talking about paying the players. And I've gone through this before about how they were able to use 2025 rev share and 2026 rev share dollars. But on top of that, you have to have true third-party NIL deals that you can get through the clearinghouse. And I've explained how this is done too, where in the past where a booster might have written $1 million check to the collective, now instead of doing that, it's like, hey, write the check from your business as a marketing expense through NILSU Max, and maybe that $1 million isn't going to one NIL deal, but that $1 million could be broken up into 40 NIL deals across the football roster, maybe even other programs. Well, you make these commitments to these players, and sure, they're probably going to get a lump sum signing bonus, but the rest of their contract is going to be paid out monthly or quarterly or however they've determined or dictated that it be paid out. And so you don't have to have all that money, that cash, the capital on hand now, but you got to go raise it. And there have been super generous donors, no doubt, that have stepped up already in a big way, but you got more to do. And it kind of dovetails into the conversation we had last week about men's basketball. Because when LSU lost last week to Mississippi State, I and many of you all just sort of assumed that this was going to be it for Matt McMahon. Verge Osbury said in the interview with The Advocate a few weeks back that if they don't make the NCAA tournament, they're going to reevaluate everything. For all intents and purposes, I took that to mean make the tournament or you're not going to be around. Well, look, there's a handful of really significant boosters around LSU, many of them who you know, their names you know, and some of them whose names you don't. And I think it's important also to know that donor fatigue can be a real thing. Like what LSU just did for football, for this 2026 football roster, I don't think they're going to do that again in 2027. Like, I don't think they're going to go spend over $40 million because this roster is over $40 million. I don't think they're going over $40 million in 2027. They may not have to because you probably have a lot of retention of this roster. You're not going to go have to sign 42 guys in the portal. But donor fatigue can be a real thing. So it's an important distinction to say, can you afford something? And are you willing to pay for something? Because those can be two very different answers. Like, can LSU go shake trees and ask donors for more money to buy out $10 million to buy out Matt McMahon and his staff, and then $3.5, $4 million a year for a new coach and then their staff, and then go pay the roster as well? Like, can you? Sure. Are you going to have as eager a donor base, that those same handful of people that you keep going to, knocking on the door, that you just went and asked them to do this massive lift for football? Are they going to be willing to do it for basketball? I don't believe that answer is so cut and dried. And I know a lot of these people, and I've had conversations with them about it. And there is some hesitation about what they're willing to go spend to make a change in men's basketball right now. Now, there's also the component that you could have other donors step up. There could be people who are quiet, sitting on the sidelines right now, who, if things continue to deteriorate with the men's basketball team this season, they get to a point like they did with football after that embarrassing Texas A&M loss, where Brian Kelly had lost support, and as a result, you had people willing to write checks. And at that point, Brian Kelly's fate was done. And the same may happen with this basketball team. Or maybe DJ Thomas gets healthy, they go on a little streak here to end the season, and they decide to go retain Matt McMahon for another year because there isn't the appetite to go spend. I'm not saying definitively that no matter what happens throughout the remainder of this basketball season, Matt McMahon's back. I'm not saying that. But I'm also telling you that if you think that story has been written, it hadn't been written yet. And a day like Saturday with Lane Kiffin going to Houston on a fundraising trip speaks to that, appealing to more donors, to new donors, to try to continue to get even more support from new and different places to help fund what they just did and what is to come. And the other thing I'll remind you is every dollar you go raise to put into a big pile and light a match, to just burn it, to buy the coach, that's money you're not spending to help you win. That's money you're not spending on your roster to help you win. That's money you're not spending on facilities or whatever the case may be, support staff. That's money you're just taking a match to. So there's going to be some real tough questions that'll be had at the end of this basketball season. And we'll watch it. But I'm here to tell you it's just not as cut and dried as you may think it is today. We'll continue to follow it. All right, it's After Further Review. We are glad to have you aboard with us here. Brought to you by First South Farm Credit, FirstSouthLand.com, FirstSouthLand.com. Thinking of buying land? Your first call should be to First South Farm Credit. Remember, you can always go to FirstSouthLand.com. They got an awesome resource, the Ultimate Land Buyer's Guide on their homepage. It is a totally free resource. If you're thinking of buying land, be it agriculture, be it your recreational property, be it 100 acres to build your family's dream home, make sure you get the Ultimate Recreational Land Buying Guide for free at FirstSouthLand.com, FirstSouthLand.com. Thinking of buying land, your first call should be to First South Farm Credit, FirstSouthLand.com. That's FirstSouthLand.com. All right, y'all, it's After Further Review. Thanks for hanging out with us here. Monday shows brought to you by Relief Windows. Tomorrow morning, I'll be wheels up out to the Bay Area. Really looking forward to it. So we'll travel tomorrow. Tuesday, we'll get into San Francisco. We'll get set up and settled and everything there. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, AFR from Radio Row at the Super Bowl. Very, very much looking forward to it. Ross Jackson will be there as well for LouisianaSports.net. So he'll be on the media shuttle every day up to San Jose or up to Stanford to go to go to all the media, or Santa Clara to go to all the media availability with the teams while I'll be at Radio Row in San Francisco. But we're looking forward to bringing that coverage. We might wonder why we're not there right now. We did it a year ago, the full week in New Orleans, and what we learned was Monday was really slow, and Tuesday was a little better, but still slow. Wednesday was kaboom. Everybody was there by Wednesday. And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday were this big run-up crescendo to the weekend. So we figured, learn from last year. Let's go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and have 3 really big days from Radio Row. So very much looking forward to doing that and leaving tomorrow morning, and we'll be there for AFR Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from Radio Row at the Super Bowl, presented by our friends at Our Lady of the Lake, Championship Health Partners of LSU Athletics. They're our sponsor for all of our coverage from Super Bowl 60, and could not be more excited about it. All right, it's after further review. Quick break. Musa do Tigers and the Pros. Don't you move. It's AFR.
AFR.
Man, I was at lunch today, and Glow Resources came up, not because of all the awesome work they do, but because of their office. Because their office is awesome as well. Like their physical space on Perkins in Baton Rouge, right near Pennington. They're at Perkins in Quail Oak, right near Pennington. It's honestly really cool just to go in there, just to see the office. It's pretty phenomenal. And man, when you walk in, one of the things you'll notice about Glow Resources, so let's say you're a business owner and you're having trouble finding the right people in your business, skilled blue-collar labor, any office job, from entry-level office assistants all the way up to the C-suite. Glow Resources taps into their network to find the perfect people for those jobs to make you the most efficient possible. Go have the meeting at Glow Resources just so you can see how cool their space is. And you'll understand how fun they are to work with. One of the reasons people love doing business with Glow Resources. GLO, glowresources.com.
After further review, presented by Relief Windows. Windows, doors, siding. And we do shutters too.
All right, wrapping up hour number 2, and glad you're hanging out with us here. Speaking of shutters, also shades over at Relief Windows. I've been telling you about it, but now they are offering custom fabric roller shades. Beautiful way to offer effortless light control and a gorgeous, streamlined look. Check them out. They're all custom. It's Relief Windows. Windows, door, siding, shutters, and now interior shades as well. Relief Windows and reliefwindows.com. Okay, Muso, Tigers and the Pros.
Tigers in the Pros. They still bleed purple and gold. They're just really rich now.
All right, the Pro Bowl games start this week, and the flag football games this weekend. They changed that, obviously. Normally, it was this past week. Yeah.
Obviously, that's obvious.
New change.
Yeah.
And Joe Burrow's going to be there now. How about that? Joey B, Pro Bowler, added to the AFC roster. That was on Sunday.
So it's course, Joey B and Shadur.
And Joe Flacco is the other AFC quarterback.
Man.
How about that?
Remember when the Pro Bowl was cool?
I was about to say, has it ever meant less to be a Pro Bowler? Shadur Sanders threw 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Joe Burrow missed 9 games. Now, we're happy for Joey B, though.
He had a toe.
He's there. He had a toe. Bad toe, man.
Bad toe.
That happened in week 2 of the season. He got the toe.
He had a toe.
Missed 9 weeks. Josh Allen, Drake May, and Justin Herbert. Those are the original AFC selections. None of them are going to play. So Joey B joins, as we just mentioned, Shadur Sanders and Joe Flacco. All from the AFC North. All from the state of Ohio. The AFC quarterbacks. So shout out. Cam Thomas, 23 minutes off the bench, contributed 12 points for the Brooklyn Nets. They got destroyed yet again. But he shot 50% from 3, also doled out 3 assists. And a quick note on some NBA action tonight. A lot of former Tigers. Rockets, Atari Eason, Timberwolves, and Nas Reed. And Trinidad Watford in the 76ers. We'll have a full recap tomorrow. That's Tigers and the Pros.
Hey, we're presented by Shaw Bills Tire and Auto Service. Quick reminder, was talking to Martin over at Shaw Bills last week. The Youngsville location, they are looking for a technician. They're hiring. So if you're an experienced technician, they want to talk to you. Shawbills is awesome, man. Family owned and operated since 1968. It's incredible, man. They're coming up on 60 years now over at Shawbills. But they have great culture, excellent benefits, and they have a monster bonus program. 5-day work week. So if you're interested, if you're a tech with experience, check out our friends at Shawbills. If you live in or around Youngsville or interested in moving to Youngsville, they need to talk to you over at Shawbills. ShawbillsTire.com. ShawbillsTire.com. Name brand tires at wholesale prices, and they treat you like family at Shawbills Tire and Auto Service. Shawbills, where we keep you rolling. All right, remember, you can always email us, tweet us, or text us, 225-396-4400, 396-4400, 396-4400. Lots of ways that you can get involved in the show. We will be on Radio Row for the Super Bowl on starting on Wednesday, so we'll count you down to Super Bowl 60 with the Patriots and the Seahawks. I'm really, really excited to get to tell some of the LSU stories. And while we're all, look, Will Campbell obviously would be the headliner of the group. You know, what Caleb Chasson and Kayshon Boutte have done in sort of reigniting their career is awesome. Really excited for those guys this week out there in the Bay Area.
After further review.
I was having a conversation at lunch today, and we're talking to our friends at the Spine Center who are about to come on as a new partner on our show. And it was so interesting because their office is there off of Bluebonnet, the same building where the Williamson Eye Center is. And I couldn't help because I actually started drawing these parallels because one of the biggest reservations a lot of people have when it comes to a refractive procedure, it's what I had. It was the trepidation of having surgery on your eyes. And it does make a lot of people nervous. A lot of you have told me this, and candidly, I was in that number too, which is why it was so important to have the consultation with Dr. Blake Williamson and to learn every step of that process and procedure, which really puts you at ease. And I spend so much time trying to push people towards this because it's life-changing. It's the Williamson Eye Center.